All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get things kicked off? We got an exciting lineup here of speakers, and I'm excited to have everyone join us this evening. We have, wow, we still have a few more people tagging along here, but we have Jeff's going to be speaking, we have Edward, we have Kimberly, and we have Irv that are all going to be speaking. So we got an exciting program lined up. And is Jeff, are you going to lead things off here?
Irv.
Irv, okay, Irv. So, Irv, why don't you go ahead and take it away, my friend?
Okay. Well, greetings to all of our difference maker brothers and sisters. It's an honor to be talking about this important subject with all of you. And I want to say hello to Dave Spicer and Maria, who are on our part of our task force, and the others that are speaking too are part of our group that showed up in a mysterious, mystical way we've had a phenomenal year. So I'm Irv de Smet. I'm the chairman of the District 5030 Environmental Sustainability Committee. You know, recently, as we all know, our Rotary International presidents, Ian Risley, followed by Barry Rassin, determined that Rotary's muscle and power, and we have substantial muscle and power, should be added to the worldwide effort that was already underway to support our earthly environment and help end the period of human devastation of the earth. And we can't deny that. There's been a period now where we thought we had control of everything, but we want to help usher in a period when humans would be present to our beloved planet in a mutually beneficial manner. It's not a question, as we all know, about just the destruction of our human culture. It's just realigning, getting the balance back. And Rotary, honestly, I think we all know, and we should remember, is a very unique position to help accomplish this really essential task to rebalance what's going on. We are the only NGO in the world to have a permanent seat in the UN General Assembly, and that's because Rotarians were instrumental in establishing that worldwide body. About 35 years ago, we all know that Rotarians took on the task single-handedly to rid the world of a disease that was ravishing the world. People were scared to death of polio, and it was just a bunch of people that said enough's enough. And we know the results, that polio has now been restricted just to a couple little pockets in the world. It was an extraordinary accomplishment. Similar, and so that was for the whole world. I mean, polio didn't have any boundaries. There was no like, I want to stop at this border. It was all of humanity was at risk. Similarly, the deteriorating conditions of our earthly environment threaten all of us as well. Again, there's no border. The rain doesn't stop at Chile and doesn't invade Argentina. It's just, we're all one world, as we all know. So as we in our district's environmental sustainability task force went through this last year, trying our best to pursue Rotary's newest area of focus, which was to support our beloved earthly environment, we realized that we needed to provide a two-pronged approach. One prong was the individual and Rotary Club basis, where we would ask and try to educate and make aware all Rotarians of how they could take individual actions, whether it be to switch to a more plant-based diet or to reduce their use of single-use plastics. And then on that first prong, we also realized that and encouraged all of our Rotary clubs to take on projects to help our environment. And during the course of this last year, we're aware of the fact that several of our Rotary clubs had tree planting projects. And our own Woodinville Rotary Club, we spent time enhancing a stream near one of our salmon streams in our area. So that's kind of that one prong, individual and club basis. But it became evident to us as we went through the year that we had to put our effort behind supporting some major policy changes. And we realized that these policy changes are impacting things in a huge way. And so we needed to get behind some of those that made sense, again, for all of humanity. So we're going to hear about some of those ideas as we go through the hour. And so we're going to hear from presentations from three members of our district task force that have been so helpful to me as the chairperson. I mean, it's been such an extraordinary effort of a combined people just really caring to the point of just having such a giving attitude toward it. Well, we're going to hear from Jeff Johnson, Ed Belcher, and Kimberly Peterson, and I'll let them when it's their turn, they'll tell you what they're going to talk about. But lastly, before I hand it over to Jeff, I want to say how proud I am. I think we should all feel a deep sense of pride that we've committed to a way of life that is so noble and so necessary, to put service above our own selves. And thinking that there's over 1 million people trying every day around the world to make the world better just makes me feel really good inside. So again, thank you, all of you, for being here with us this hour, and we're going to do our best to make it valuable for all of you. So thanks again. So Jeff, you're up.
All right. Can everybody see the slides? Or I guess.
Yes.
Slide. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff. I know that the environmental focus area involves a lot more than climate change, but I think that this is a pressing issue that demands action. Unfortunately, the climate crisis has been framed by many as a political issue in spite of all the evidence out there and the science being pretty well understood. So today I'm going to try to convince you that this issue is not political, that it can be understood using fairly simple ideas, and that the need for action here is urgent. I like to start from the basics. Why is there a climate crisis? We've all read about these in headlines, but a lot of stuff is glossed over in news stories. And what I would like us to do is to start to be able to reason about what's going on in terms of basic ideas that pretty much anybody can understand. The climate crisis is really about energy. And all of you are pretty familiar with energy. Whether you've thought about it from a scientific perspective or not, you have a lot of experience with it. The good news is that energy is kind of like money, but it's just the money that nature uses. It makes everything happen. Objects move around because they have energy. It's carried around and exchanged between things, just like money is. And it can be converted from one form to another. Hot things have energy, and moving things have energy, and those things can exchange energy, just like you can buy something at the store. It can change things into other things. If you ever watched ice melt or water evaporate when it boils, if you've ever watched something rust, if you've ever taken a breath, you have exchanged energy within your body to store it. The respiration process is just another part of the energy cycle. But the analogy isn't perfect. When somebody gives you energy, you have to figure out what to do with it. You either get rid of it or you do something with it. And this is unlike money, because in recent times, we've all seen central banks take an increasing role in controlling the global money supply. We can't do this with energy, and this turns out to be pretty important. So let's pan out a little bit. Let's talk about where the Earth gets its energy. I think everybody here is familiar with a giant fireball in the sky we call the sun that is constantly dumping energy on the Earth. Even when it's nighttime, some part of the Earth is getting energy from the sun. What does the Earth do with its energy, given that it has to get rid of it or it has to make use of it somehow? Well, briefly, sorry. So the sun shines energy on the Earth, and a lot of the energy is absorbed by the Earth and causes it to get warmer. But a certain amount of that energy is also reflected back into the sun or into space through the Earth's atmosphere, but not all of it. The Earth's atmosphere is actually able to trap some of the energy from the sun, in addition to what it absorbs and is used by life on its surface. And this is an interesting thing, because since energy can't be created or destroyed, the Earth's supply of energy can either grow, shrink, or stay the same depending on how much energy it reflects out into space. If it keeps all the energy from the sun, it's going to heat up or gain energy, if you like. And if it gets rid of all of the energy that it has, it's going to cool down. And so you might wonder what happens in the extreme case when the Earth is absorbing more energy than it can get rid of, or when it's getting rid of energy at a faster rate than it gets it. Well, the fortunate thing is that the solar system has already done this experiment for us. We're in a line of planets around us that actually have different conditions that allow us to understand what happens when the Earth keeps more of its energy or when it gets rid of more. So the planet on the left here is Venus. It's the planet that's the next closest to us, it's closer to us, to the sun than we are. And it's about the same size as the Earth. And on the right, there's Mars, which is much smaller than the Earth, and it's further away from the sun, and it's cooler. So Venus is interesting because it absorbs more solar energy than the Earth does, and it can't get rid of it. And you might notice from this picture that you can't see the surface of Venus, that its atmosphere is very cloudy. And those of you who were around when the Soviet Union tried to land a probe on Venus might remember that they never were able to land anything because the probe disintegrated before it hit the surface. So Venus absorbs more energy than it can get rid of, and it's a very hostile place to live. If there is any life on it, we don't know about it because we can't even land anything there to take a look. On the other hand, Mars is cold and it doesn't have much of an atmosphere because if you heat up air enough on Mars, it'll just leave because Mars doesn't weigh enough to keep the air around. So we're in a sweet spot in the solar system. We're kind of in a balance where life is able to thrive on the surface of the Earth because we're getting energy from the sun that we need, but we're not getting too much of it. So you guys have probably heard about greenhouse gases when you heard about climate change and the climate crisis. How does this fit into the whole puzzle? We know that the Earth has some sort of energy budget and that if it gets too much of it, it needs to do stuff to use the energy or get rid of it. How do greenhouse gases fit into this? Well, here are some schematic representations of greenhouse gas molecules. The balls are atoms, and they're connected by these tubes that represent molecular bonds. And the important thing about greenhouse gases is that they're small and light enough to exist in the atmosphere and move around freely. But it's also important that they have these bonds between their atoms because their structure turns out to be an important part of their behavior. So what greenhouse gases like to do is they like to capture energy and they like to use that energy to move around so that the atoms kind of do a little dance and the bonds change their shape. This is the way that they use energy when they capture it from things like sunlight that's going around. So these molecules are springy and bendy and they can store energy as heat, which looks like this jiggling motion at the microscopic level. That is what heat looks like. So greenhouse gases take energy that's on the move, which is like reflected sunlight from the Earth on the way back up into space, and they trap it in the form of this jiggly heat motion. This is what we call the greenhouse gas effect. It's been known to scientists since the 19th century, and the way that it works is pretty well described by modern physics using the same principles that make the transistors work in your computers that you're using to watch this. So we pretty much know that this is true. So how it works, you can imagine that when you don't have very many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it's fine. The sun shines on the Earth absorbs what it wants, reflects what it doesn't, and most of that energy makes it back out into space. But when the Earth's atmosphere contains a lot of greenhouse gases, more light energy is trapped as heat, and it can't escape, and that leaves the Earth's atmosphere with more energy. And heat energy can be converted back into motion. So essentially, the more heat that's trapped in the atmosphere, the more energy there is to move things around. Well, I've described the physical processes to you, but how do we know that this has anything to do with climate science? We have, it turns out, a lot of circumstantial evidence. In the mid-20th century, a chemist named David Keeling had a hunch that the ocean can only store a limited amount of carbon dioxide, and that human-induced emissions were causing a buildup of this gas in the atmosphere. He actually verified this idea in 1962 by taking air samples he collected from a monitoring station he built on Mauna Loa at 11,000 feet. It's a spot with some of the world's cleanest air. And for this, he received the Medal of Science in 2001 for pioneering work related to global warming. You can see on this graph is basically a concentration of CO2 in the air over time. On the left end, there are ice cores that were taken that date back to the 1800s. And on the right, there's the new data from Mauna Loa. And you can see that since about the mid-century, it's been climbing precipitously. The reason that he thought about human emissions is that a lot of the industrial activity that we do does put CO2 in the air. Nature and natural processes also put CO2 in the air, but the stuff that we're piling on top of those processes is causing an excess of CO2 that can't be absorbed by natural processes. And the main source of this CO2 gas in the atmosphere that we're seeing today is the burning of fossil fuels. So that graph I just showed you, let's zoom out a little bit. The current levels of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere are unlike anything that we've observed in recent geologic history. You have to go all the way back to the Pliocene area, which is between 2 and 5 million years ago, to see an Earth that has this much CO2 in the atmosphere. You can see that these vertical blue shaded areas are interglacial periods of thaw between ice ages on Earth. And you can see that we're kind of in one of those, but that we've kind of taken off with the amount of CO2. It's just off the chart, literally speaking here. And the Mauna Loa observatory measurements I showed in the other graph are all scrunched into this vertical line here. So this is not natural. And if you want to put this in context of the Earth's geologic history, there's actually a great article in the Atlantic from March that does a retrospective using data from these ice cores that go back to paint a picture of how the Earth looked and how hostile it was to life forms. This is not good for us. So this graph looks very busy, but what it is it's showing the rise in the Earth's surface temperature as reported by 4 different agencies. These agencies use the same data, but they make different assumptions. But that said, the data are pretty much on top of each other. And the differences in the curves don't really matter. They all tell the same story. What is meant by a temperature anomaly here is just the difference between the temperature we observe now and a reference temperature that's this flat bar. So up and to the right means the temperature is increasing. It turns out that 19 of the 20 hottest years that were ever measured with instruments have occurred since 2000. And 2020 is tied with 2016 for first place. So what does this do? You have an Earth's atmosphere with a ton of energy in it. We've started seeing things we've never seen before. August 2015, we had 3 Category 4 hurricanes occur simultaneously in the Eastern Pacific Ocean. This is the first time we've ever seen anything like this. If you look at the scale here, this is Hawaii in the middle of the screen. That's how big these hurricanes are. That's how much air is being moved around by the excess energy in the Earth's atmosphere that it can't get rid of because greenhouse gases are trapping it as heat. Here's a look at a supercell storm from the surface of the ocean. I think this is a tree right here, just to show you the scale of the kind of structures that can form in the sky. So these extreme precipitation events have produced more rain and become more common since the 1950s in several regions all around the world, including the US. And of course, when it rains more, it floods more. And floods have been occurring all over the world. This is a dramatic one that was seen in India in 2015, but you don't have to go to India. This is one that occurred in the last 5 years in Washington State. I'm pretty sure that that's not the situation where the house was built. There are knock-on effects of having so much CO2 in the atmosphere and in the ocean. Here we can see an example of coral bleaching. On the left is a healthy coral reef. On the right is a bleached one. This is occurring from ocean acidification, which is an effect of the ocean absorbing CO2 from the atmosphere. The ocean and the atmosphere are right next to each other, and so they talk and they exchange things. And one of the things they exchange is energy, and another thing they exchange is CO2. We've also seen pretty extreme examples of drought. You don't have to go to Brazil to see a picture like this. This is just one that I think illustrates what happens, the scale of the drawing of moisture out of the soil. As the atmosphere warms, it absorbs moisture from the soil, and as a result, areas can dry out. So while we see flooding in some places, we see drought in others. It's just, there's so much energy moving everything around that the way that it's distributing resources is not good for people who live in different areas. This picture is from southern Brazil in 2015 and 2016. We've also been seeing a lot of fires. In 2016, this fire in the heart of the Canadian tar sands region destroyed large parts of the city of Fort McMurray in Alberta, and it forced the evacuation of over 100,000 people. And for those of you keeping track locally, in Washington, we're seeing more fires every summer, and they don't even wait for summer. They start as early as March, some years. The ice on the Earth is also affected. This glacier in Southwest Greenland had almost completely melted by 2013 due to rising temperatures. I'm going to play this movie one more time just so you can see the dramatic difference between 1935 and 2013. NASA has been able to measure the decline in the mass of ice in both Greenland and Antarctica, and that's what this blue curve is. All this extra melting is raising sea levels worldwide. You can see that everything's really connected by this amount of energy in the atmosphere and spreading to other parts of Earth. And this is a collapse of a large shelf in Antarctica in December 2018 after it was pelted by violent ocean waves. Normally, these shelves are protected by sea ice, but a lot of the sea ice has been melting. So we're going to see more of this. Some people say, well, you know, higher temperatures are good for crops, right? But it turns out heat stress is starting to decrease crop yields from rice and corn and soybeans. And higher levels of CO2 also decrease the nutrient content of a lot of staple crops. And beyond this, there are other knock-on effects that we can't even talk about in the limited time, from increased concentrations of CO2 and rising surface temperatures and rising sea levels. So I hope this illustrates the scale of the crisis that we're faced with. This is really, we're all in the same boat here. As Irv mentioned earlier, these crises don't consider national borders to be important. And so since we're all here, I would like to turn you over to Ed to talk to you about how Rotary is uniquely positioned to help out with this.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Let me get the screen up and we'll go. All right, I'm Ed Belcher, and I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Lake Forest Park, Washington. And Jeff just did a great job discussing the cause of climate change and the climate disruption that we've seen. And in my piece, I'm just going to go over or support one solution that can reduce emission of greenhouse gases. In April 2019, I was happy to see that the Rotarian magazine dedicated its entire front page, the cover, and a number of stories on climate solutions. And one of the stories was about Citizens Climate Lobby, which was founded by Marshall Sanders. He's a longtime member of the Rotary Club in Coronado, California. And it turns out you don't have to wait. It's also, CCL is also featured in the May 2021 Rotary magazine, the one that's sitting on your table right now that you may not have seen yet, may not read. But if you go in there, you'll see there's a story called Rotary's Hidden Influence that has helped 7 organizations. And one of the organizations is Citizens Climate Lobby, the one that Marshall Sanders formed. And the way he did, he, in 2006, Marshall went to Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth movie, the film, and he came back a week later and saw it again. And then another week later, he went back and saw it a third time, and he was just really shaken by this thing. And so he said, I've got to do something about this. And so he started giving talks to Rotary clubs and schools and churches and anywhere he could go and to talk about the climate problem. And so now I'm going to read a little blurb that's in the story here. After one presentation, a woman asked him what should be done. And he responded, what's needed is thousands of ordinary people organized, lobbying their members of Congress with one voice, one message, and lobbying in a relentless, unstoppable, yet friendly and respectful way. And she said, well, why don't you do that? There you go. He said, what needed to be done? Why don't you do it? So a year later, he formed Citizens Climate Lobby, and it's still got its major headquarters in Coronado, California. The size has grown a little bit. Now there's a little over 182,000 members, and they're in 465 chapters. And what these members do, they call their members of Congress. They write letters to their members of Congress. And they also lobby at least 3 times a year with each member of Congress, either the actual person or their staffer. And worldwide, there's an additional 14,000, a little bit more than 14,000 members in 171 countries. So like Jeff said, this is a world problem. And so the Citizens Climate Lobby has just grown beyond the United States. And when I went to the conference last summer, they actually said they're forming a Citizens Climate Lobby International. So they're actually going to be dividing themselves into 2 groups just because it's gotten so big. And in Washington State, there's 6,803 members. And because it was formed by a Rotarian, the principles of Citizens Climate Lobby sounds very familiar to a Rotarian. It's bipartisan. They welcome anyone that is interested in solving climate change. It's relationship driven. We're always willing to continue the conversation. Mutual respect and understanding. Respectful relationships with other people. And it's effective. It helps maximize your skills. I know I've gone through some classes on doing lobbying and so forth. It's helped me out and builds relationships with members of Congress. The idea is not to be confrontational, but to just reason with them and talk to them. And there's some members of Congress that, the Citizens Climate Lobby is the most delightful lobby I've ever known. And I've been a member of Congress for, decades, whatever it was. So we try to be on that side, the kind of side that you would want a good Rotarian to be. And it also goes for the big solution. I mean, like Jeff was saying, we were going for end polio. Well, why not say we want to reduce America's emissions fast and meet the Paris Agreement? Is that a big solution? Yeah, that's pretty big. And that's what they're trying to do. Well, in the Citizens Climate Lobby website, there's some pages that are dedicated to Rotary clubs and service clubs of all kinds, Kiwanis, Lions, etc. And you can then hobnob with these other club members and have discussions and view videos and watch presentations that have been used in service clubs. And so I think there's it's 77 members. It's not huge, 77 members, and most of them are Rotarian. Well, there's lots of legislation plans to reduce greenhouse gases, stimulus, regulations, infrastructure, incentives. That's what you're seeing in the news right now. But there's also cap and trade, cap and auction, and carbon fee and dividend. And that's what I'm going to stick with. Just this one, we don't have a lot of time, carbon fee and dividend. I'll talk about that plan. First of all, it's popular with economists. Over 3,000 economists published in January 17, 2019 in the Wall Street Journal that they were supporting carbon fee and dividend as the best way for us to reduce our emissions. And it's also popular with some of our, which it has to be, right? It would never become a law. Mitt Romney said that he calls it a carbon tax and carbon dividend. On March the 10th, Dick Durbin from Illinois introduced the first CFD bill in our new Congress. And on April 1st, Ted Deutsch from Florida. Now, Florida's got a lot of coastline. So yeah, right, Jeff, that's going to be a problem. So he introduced another CFD plan called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Well, Citizens Climate Lobby supports Dutch's CFD. And so I'm going to use that particular one as an example. So what in the world is a carbon fee and dividend plan? Well, here you have your coal, oil, and gas. They've been around for 200 years. They're very useful. They generate a lot of heat per unit volume. The problem is they're giving us all this carbon dioxide and other pollutants into the air, and they've been doing it for a long time and making that little curve that you saw earlier go up. So the idea is you have a carbon fee, which you assess each of these fossil fuels, and you assess them at the point of origin, or maybe a point of extraction where they dig them out of the ground, or where they a point of import where they bring them in and start unloading them from a ship. So there's a few places, not millions of places, but a few places, and that's where you go, and you, when they're hauling it out, you figure out what the volumes are, and you then assess a fee. Now, how do they get a fee per volume? What they do is they say, okay, coal, a certain volume of coal will generate a ton of carbon dioxide when burned. That is the unit volume for coal. Oil, what's the unit volume of oil that will generate a ton of carbon dioxide? Okay, what's the unit volume for gas that will generate a ton of carbon dioxide? Okay, each of those is a unit for each of those fossil fuels. And they're assessed a fee. And that fee goes into a carbon dividend trust fund. It doesn't go into the darkness of the government, never to be seen again. It goes to a carbon dividend fund. And that's why they call it a fee and not a tax, because the government doesn't keep it. So this fee then goes back down and is distributed as dividends to American households. Now you're saying, well, why is that going to be working? Why are you doing that? Well, because you know when you assess these fees to the coal, oil, and gas, then utilities are going to have to pay those fees, the refiners, the manufacturers are going to have higher prices. And so obviously there's going to be higher prices for carbon products going to American households. Well, that seems kind of crummy, and they're not going to be for it, right? They don't want us to have their prices go up. So, and not be compensated in some way. So that's what the dividend does. It comes back and it compensates the American households while those fees go up in the carbon world. Now, that sounds kind of silly because that's just going in circles, right? But it doesn't go in circles because you have green energy and products, and they're not assessed carbon fees because they don't generate carbon dioxide. So at some point along the way, and actually many points along the way, some families are going to say, hey, you know, instead of buying another gas car, I'm going to go and buy an electric vehicle. Then I'm going to lower my footprints, make it smaller, but I'm still going to get the dividend. So it's a kind of a good deal. And that isn't silly. That really happens. That's human nature. So here's a graph that was put together by economists and analysts of how carbon emissions will drop over time as those fees continue to escalate, starting at $15 a ton, and then every year after that, $10 higher, $10 higher, $10 higher. All right, so the prices are going up, and so then as that happens, the percent of the net emissions start dropping, and in 2050 down here, it'll be down to a net zero emissions. And that's a good deal because that would then meet the Paris Agreement. That's the whole point. So you just is a way to get rid of make it, people are starting to leave carbon because it's getting too expensive and they're going to green products. And here's an idea why it's just, because if you look at this scale, these are like, think of these as carbon footprints. And this is household income. And so as the household income goes up, the carbon footprint goes up as well. Why is that? Well, they have more cars, they have bigger houses, they go on more plane trips, they use more carbon. But, oh yeah, and in addition to that, so the wealthy households tend to have a larger carbon footprint. So we saw that. The government generates 30% of CO2 emissions, and they don't get dividends, right? They don't know that money doesn't go to the government, it goes to households. So when you add those two together, you get enough fees that 70% of households actually get back more than they spend on higher prices. So tell me that's not going to be popular. That's going to be very popular. So that's what you need in order for this thing to work for 30 years. You got to have everybody liking it, or at least almost. And the people are, even these wealthy households, they're getting a dividend back. It's just their dividend doesn't cover their footprint. So what can they do? Well, what they should do, and what they should do if they're smart, is they're going to say, well, we're going to reduce our footprint. And everybody's going to be playing the same game. They're going to be reducing their footprint because they want to increase the profit, if you will, or reduce the loss they're getting with respect to these dividends. So if you look at families getting paid, they'll after 10 years, a family of 4 will get a dividend of about $3,000. And in year 16, they'll be getting a dividend of about $4,000 because the prices keep going up. They get these larger dividends, and they show up in their if they have a bank account, that shows up directly into their bank account. I guess it's not too unlike these stimulus checks that people get. So, they just coming in, and that's a good thing. So what happens when you have people wanting to turn away from carbon and go to green energy? Well, that's going to create a demand. And that's what the economists are saying as well. You're creating a demand like never before for green technology, green products. And so what's going to happen? Industry, they're not dumb. R&Ds, they're not dumb. They're saying, okay, we got to plan ahead, because we know this bill is going to be in effect for 30 years. We know the prices are going to go up for 30 years. People are going to love it, so they're not going to allow their congressmen to kill it. And so we better have something to sell to these people when they turn around and want to buy something. And so R&D will go in high gear, industry will go in high gear. They start scaling this, they start getting better products. And so the price of the green technology will start going down while the carbon prices are going up. What's not to like about that? So in summary, because they say you're supposed to say the same thing more than once, I'm going to say this more than once. So first of all, fossil fuel fees are going to be charged at the point of extraction or import, and that's going to make fewer places that you have to levy those fees. Right at the very beginning, as far upstream as you can go. Fees are going to be placed in the Carbon Dividend Trust Fund. There it is, a big pot of money. Households are going to receive monthly dividends. 70% of the households receive more money in dividends than they paid due to higher costs. Then you have the dividend profit idea, which says, okay, if I reduce my footprint, I'm going to make more profit, or I'm going to reduce my loss. Okay, so they start playing that game. Everybody would play that game. And then according to analysts, as I said before, if you start off with $15 a ton, which adds, what does it add? It adds 16 cents to a gallon of gasoline. That's what $15 a ton does. And then every year after that, you add $10 a ton to those fees. That's going to be 11 cents a gallon added to your gasoline price. And all your fuel prices and so forth. So 30 years will bring down CO2 emissions to a net zero by 2050 and meet the Paris Agreement. And it's not only that, it's a simple plan, and people like simple plans. You look at some of the other ones, the cap and trade and the auction and trade, and the one we have for Washington State's 80 pages in text. That's the plan to make the plan. So this is a really simple plan. It's hard for people to think people are cheating because it's pretty straightforward. It's hard to cheat in this thing. So like I say, the bill was introduced in the House on April the 1st. There's 41 co-sponsors, more than any other climate bill right now in Congress. Now, in our state, we have 10 representatives. Only one of those representatives, Derek Kilmer, has co-sponsored this bill. So 9 of them haven't. And probably most of you have one of the 9 that has it, because Derry Kilmer is on the Olympic Peninsula. So I imagine nobody's living over there. So there is no companion bill either. No one in the Senate is given the companion bill to this bill yet. So there's a lot of work that CCL has to do. And, you know, I'm hoping that there'll be more Rotarians that join CCL, put their voices in, and see if we can't get something like this passed. So this is my last slide. Rotary's 7th Avenue of service indicates that Rotary will be a leader for the environmental sustainability. And let's our next 30-year journey take us beyond fossil fuels. And there is the website for Energy Innovation Act. They'll tell you all about it, a lot more details than I could. And then Citizens Climate Lobby will tell you about the lobby group, more details than I could tell you today. But it's pretty straightforward. You just more or less type in Energy Innovation Act and you'll get it. Type in Citizens Climate Lobby and you'll get it. And you can check them out. That's it. So with that, I am going to go back and unshare my screen if I can figure out where is that? Oh. All right, guys. Why am I don't see my share screen thing. Where'd it go?
It's going to be a little button at the top of your screen there.
Oh,
right?
yeah. You know,
right
I do that. I have done that more than once. I always think it's going to be in the same place, but it changes when you go into it. So I'm going to say stop share. It's a big red square, rectangle. There we go. So now I'm going to introduce Kimberly, unless Herb wants to introduce Kimberly. What do you say? You're fine? Okay, I'm going to introduce Kimberly and she's going to give her talk. Go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Let me get my screen sharing up and going. Here we are. Presentation mode. All right, I am so excited to introduce to you the brand new Environmental Rotary Club of Puget Sound. And I am so delighted that Rotary International is solidly behind this endeavor and supporting us, and that District 5030 is solidly behind us and supporting this effort. And we are so excited to get our club started. So let me tell you about us. We are not yet chartered, but we are close. We have 13 charter members. In order to charter, we need 20 members. So if you're on the fence, please step up and we'd love to have you. The age range of the members we have is 21 to 74. So we have college students to retirees. Everyone is welcome. 8 of our 13 members are completely new to Rotary, and that's very exciting. And we are hoping to charter by the end of June, so fingers crossed. And we have been meeting regularly since January 2021. We began with a online Zoom informational meeting back in October, and now we meet twice a month on Zoom, and it's great. So what is this club? Why should it be formed? You know, we are a new Rotary club for anyone who cares about the environment. Like, our standards are very low. We want everyone who cares about the environment to join and be a part of our club. And what's really nice about this Rotary Club is it brings together a love for sustainability and preserving the environment with the community service oomph of Rotary International. So we plan to make community service events in the Puget Sound area that will make a positive impact on the environment we live in. And we are working on planning those as we meet. Oops, sorry. So we've only really been meeting regularly for going on 5 months now, but we've had a great docket of amazing guest speakers. At our informational meeting, David Montgomery, a University of Washington professor, gave a an interesting discussion on soil and how soil can prevent climate change. Then in January, Professor Carl Copeland, who wrote a book on how to live your life on 4 tons a year of carbon, gave a very interesting speech about what everyday people can do to reduce their own carbon footprint. We had a staff attorney for the Puget Sound Keepers talk about what environmental laws they have been able to use to successfully make the waters in the Puget Sound cleaner and make these concessions with the companies that are polluting to force them to clean them up rather than just pay the government. And we had Matthew Axe, the Wildfire and Forest Resiliency Coordinator of the King Conservation District, speak last month, or I guess that was in March. Time flies when you're having fun. And recently, Jeremy Lucas from the East Side Audubon Society gave us an interesting speech about how climate change is affecting migratory bird patterns. Very interesting. So we are still working on forming, but we are working hard on making events that are fun and informative. This month, on the 16th, we will start a monthly nature walk. The one this month will be at St. Edward's Park, and that should be a great time. Last month, in honor of Earth Day, we hosted an online movie night, and that was great success. And we plan to continue doing that as long as I can secure the viewing rights for it. And one of my hopes is that like 5 of our 13 members are actually Rotarians coming from other clubs. And one of my hopes is that our club can be an ambassador and get support from other Rotary clubs within the district to make a bigger impact on our community service projects. So Kiss the Ground was our inaugural movie night on April 24th, and about 15 people came, and that was wonderful. This month, we are showing a movie called Seeding Change, which is about sustainable commerce and how what you buy can positively affect the climate. And we're working on June, so very exciting. Stay tuned. We are on social media. We have Facebook and Instagram. We're not cool enough for TikTok, sorry. But you can find us on Instagram and also on our Facebook page. We list all of our events on our Facebook page. And so that is our club. We're very excited to be forming, and I turn it back to you, Irv.
Yeah, I would like to say a few things before we take on questions. And it's just an amazing, the Rotary movement is amazing, as I think we all know. And I would be very remiss if I didn't mention these things, that we are not powerless. I think all of us need to recognize that there is great power in each of us and as a group. And just an example, we've learned so much in the last year. We've only been alive for a month, and we've learned that Rotary has such amazing generators of knowledge and leadership. And 2 of those groups would be called the Rotary Climate Action Team Network, RCAT, and SRAG, United Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. And those of us that have been in the task force are just astounded. I certainly am, I know all of us are, by what's out there. And the effort being made is extraordinary to make this change happen and to rebalance. And I think I just want to say, I don't know if I didn't do any slides, so I have to say to all of you, if you are interested in taking part, please give me a call. I mean, I'll take the calls, and I'll give you my numbers available in DACDB, but it's 425-829-0929. 0759. That's 425-829-0759. People have come into our task force just by one after the other because they've been totally committed and want to take part. We welcome that. And what we'd like to have happen is on all 46 clubs that have at least one or two people, maybe form a committee for the environmental sustainability work, but at least have a contact point. There's so much that we can disseminate together. And as the chairman, I can't tell you how powerful I have seen the effort that Rotary Together can put forth. So that's just my pitch and my invitation. I'm sure all of us that are on the task force now would agree with me. There's room for all of us, and the passions are real, and it's exciting to me. We are not powerless. And so that's all I want to say. And now we can go for some questions. And I know that both of the district governors that are coming in, Howard and Kay, are listening into this. And I know that they're committed as well. And so it's phenomenal to have the leadership of our Rotary district so much wedded to our mission. It's really wonderful. Back to you, Scott. You can take it away.
Yeah, so I will just call on folks if anyone has a question. If you want to go ahead and just unmute yourself, and maybe if you have your video on, you can kind of raise your hand and we can feel free to ask a question. All right, Kay, first up to bat, go ahead and ask a question. You can direct it towards any of our speakers tonight.
Actually, it's not a question, it's an accolade. And I, as the club extension person for District 5030, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Irv, your committee, and your task force, because you have been so generous with your time in helping us get our Rotary Club, Environmental Rotary Club, up and running and chartered. And for people that don't quite understand the difference, the Rotary Club are people who are, that's a cause-based club. Their mission, all of their community service, every program they do will be focused around the environment. Whereas Irv's committee on a district level is to infuse that similar excitement into each of your clubs. But in addition to your scholarships and your fundraising and your food banking, the environmental is an important role as well. So they both can absolutely coexist fabulously within our district. And we do get a lot of questions. I get a lot of questions about, are we sabotaging one or the other? And I just want to be really clear. And again, I want to reiterate my really heartfelt thanks to Irv and your committee for the leadership in getting this club off the ground. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Kay. Do we have anyone else that has a question? All right, Scott, I saw your hand first. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I saw that in January, President Biden issued an executive order for both the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Interior to form plans for what he called a civilian climate corps, almost similar to what FDR did back in the 30s. Do you have any update on what's going on with that?
I don't, but I've heard of it also. And anybody have anything on that would be, I don't, but I've heard of it.
I don't either.
But why not?
Why not?
Things are changing rapidly. Let's there is great hope. I mean, you can just sense it that there's been a paradigm shift in our thinking toward the planet.
Oh yeah.
I'm very confident that there will be continued changes for the better.
Yeah, great question, Scott. We'll have to keep our eyes on that for updates here in the future.
I see Larry Logue too. He's got one.
Yeah, I see Larry. That's what I was just going to call on. Larry, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay. Hey, what a great set of presentations. And I love what the work you're doing. I notice it's primarily directed at what we can do as individuals and within our own environment, US and our own state. But also starting July 1st, I think Rotary is allowing global grants to be written using against this seventh area of focus. And I'm just wondering if you've thought about how you or any of the clubs might be preparing grants that could be then brought to places outside of US where they really have other environmental crises. We've got somebody coming in next week in our the international service session. I've got the new Foundation Cadre technical expert who's heading up their environmental committee. And he's going to be there talking a little bit about how you might write grants for environmental issues. And if any of you want to come to it, you'd be welcome asking him about that. But have you done anything thinking about international projects?
Not yet, but Larry, make sure that you get your phone number to me right now in the chat room or something. We definitely want to pursue that. We've talked about it. We've done so many amazing things. It's hard to do everything, but our focus continues to evolve, and it's pretty amazing to me how it's evolving in a powerful way. So I'm sure we want to get into that.
And I'm definitely going
certainly
to
be invited.
I'm definitely going to the session on global grants because I'm very interested. The world is our oyster, right?
Correct. Make sure.
Hi, Larry. This is Maria. I just want to pitch in here. Yes, this is of high interest to us in our District 5030 Environmental Sustainability Committee. We recently discussed a great opportunity that is a global opportunity. And we are planning to attend the training sessions. And this is just FYI for everybody. It's a called Hack for Earth initiative. And we are, as a committee, planning on discussing this further to see how we can apply for a global grant.
Awesome. Thank
That's
you,
true.
Maria.
That's true. That's true.
Larry, what day and time is your session on during this month of training?
Okay, is next week on Thursday. I believe it's at 5:00 p.m. And I believe the title of it is International Service, Your District Network. But one of the three speakers is this cadre person who is heading up the environmental. We're also talking about WASH and environmental development, but one of the three will be environment specifically. I'll send Irv that information too.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? All right. I see Steve's hands up. Steve, why don't you go ahead and unmute?
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Bergman, sitting here on Vashon Island. And we really appreciate all three talks. They were great to see all the great things that are going on in the district. We on Vashon are involved in a lot of environmental service or activities currently. We just finished a big beach cleanup effort last weekend. And we've had a recent electronics recycling. We're real active in trying to keep Vashon sustainable and make it more sustainable. So I'm wondering if it's possible to just compile all the great things that all the different clubs in the district are already doing, because I think there's a lot going on, and that might be a good way to just inform everybody about how it's really happening.
Yeah, I wish we could do that. Sorry, I wish we could do that more easily, Steve. There's been 4 or 5 clubs that have been more responsive than others, and so we're trying to get that data accomplished, and it's an ongoing effort. But you're exactly right. I would love to have a list to show what we're already doing and how we can retrain ourselves to think more about our projects, how they do relate to the environment as part of this increased awareness that we're working on. It's a great, thank you so much for that, Steve. I saw your summary in an email, and you guys have done amazing stuff over there.
And the other comment that I wanted to make about the carbon fee is that I think that whole approach is going to take too long. I think we have to make this transition a lot quicker than that might allow. So I'm wondering if there are other methods that we can, successfully transition through this fossil fuel sourced energy to more greener energy. It seems like we're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, if you know what I mean.
Well, to answer your question, if Citizens Climate Lobby thought there was a faster way to do it, they'd glom onto it. I think when you look at the fact that we've had fossil fuels for 200 years, there's trillions of dollars of infrastructure for fossil fuels. People like fossil fuels, except for the CO2. So it's not like pollution, where remember back in the 70s, we had the first Earth Day, and we wanted to get rid of pollution, and we set some standards and we got rid of pollution pretty good. We had the Clean Air Act, we had the Clean Water Act, we banned leaded gasoline. And the reason why that was so easy is because nobody likes pollution. Nobody likes it. The only people that like pollution are companies that are making money because they don't have to pay to get rid of their stuff. So they dump it in the rivers or they dump it in the air. But people like their automobiles, and they like their natural gas furnaces, and they're not really, this is something you can't just switch like a light switch. And that's why it can take a few years to get people to relinquish their furnace that they just bought, or their car they just bought, or some companies have just put in a huge structure that they've spent millions of dollars on, and they just don't want to get rid of it right away and go over to other products. So I think if you can do it in 30 years, that would be fantastic, because we've known about it since 1970. Actually, we've known it before that, and we haven't done anything from 70 to now, really, except make more carbon. So it's really a tough problem, really a hard problem. Have you read the book by Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Calamity?
No, not yet.
I would suggest you read it, because he says it's really a hard problem. And he's right. It really is, to try to get us off. It's not trivial. I wish it wouldn't.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to add something to this. We're not taking a single approach. There's a lot of people looking at clean technology and alternative sources of energy, but that's not going to work by itself either. A lot of excitement has been generated about how wind and solar are gaining on fossil fuels, but the fact of the matter is storing electrical energy is still harder than carrying a gas can around. We just don't have anything like that. Batteries are not where they need to be. So we need multiple approaches, and the economic approach has to do with altering people's behavior, and the technological approach has to do with trying to allow people to still have some of the conveniences of modern life, but not have as big of an impact on the earth. We need both approaches.
I totally agree. And I just think that there's a lot of technological alternatives, it's easy to drive electric cars. I mean, we like our cars, and we can just switch from internal combustion to other motors. But the energy has to come from somewhere. So we need, some advances in battery storage. And I mean, geothermal, for instance, is not really being considered, I don't think, as much as it should be. I mean, there's a lot of geothermal potential in the United States that could be harnessed.
That is
ground
true,
source heat
but
pump in everybody's houses.
The Department of Energy actually has a lot of research programs in geothermal. The problem is anything under the earth needs to be gotten to, and that's very difficult and energy intensive. So there are people thinking along these lines. If it were easier, if it were an easy problem, we'd have more purchase on it.
Yeah.
Scott, when do you want to?
I agree that politics is a real issue because of the amount of money that's behind a lot of the fossil fuels industry. So it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, there you go. It's a challenge. If we can do it in 30 years, we'll meet the Paris Agreement. I think that's where we've come into this Paris Agreement, because we have this ticking time bomb that Jeff was talking about. The world is getting warmer and warmer, and then there's these positive feedback systems that are going to go into effect. I don't want to sound horrible about this, but there's a time when it won't be able to stop the direction we're going. Right now, we can stop it, but after 3 degrees, and the ocean currents start changing, and all this methane comes bubbling up from the bottom of the ocean. And there's a lot of horror stories that they're talking about that we want to not happen. So 30 years, if we can get it done in 30 years, and we don't have the world going beyond 1.5 degrees C, we'll make it. We'll make it. But that's the ticking time bomb. We're in trouble if we can't do that.
Well, and I would point out that, there are alternative forms of government and alternative methods that have also failed to gain traction. In 2013, China made the environment one of its major priorities, which it had never done before. And it instituted a carbon trading system that was meant to go into effect in 2018, and they're still gathering enough information to begin the trading. So that's not happening. And they looked like they were moving in 2017 away from coal, but the coal lobby is so powerful, even in command and control China, that they're still building coal plants there. So it's not a straightforward issue, and like a change in politics doesn't guarantee success.
Scott, when should we, this is so interesting, we go on and on and on, but I kind of have, personally, I've got to get going too. So I would just thank everybody. I mean, the game is on, the fight is on. It's a righteous fight. We're Rotarians. Bill Gates Sr. in 2007 at the international conference in Utah said, Rotary has to get involved. It's one of the few organizations. He was a keynote speaker at the convention. You got to do it. You guys are one of the few that can pull off big stuff. So I'm so happy for all of us to understand that. And it's not, the game is on, and let's go for it. Never lose hope. We're Rotarians. I think we should close it up now so we can all get on it, but we'll have more chances to get together in the future.
Thank
Be
you
not afraid.
all.
Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. A great way to end it, Irv. And thank you to our presenters as well and everyone that made it out tonight. Hope everyone has a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, very much for your help.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Bye-bye.